Angelize was a pathetic princess living a fake life until one day her secret of not having any mana abilities is exposed. With that, she is exiled to a far-off island with dragons. However, before any of this, Angelize is leading the Ho-Oh Institute Iria team in a match against Floria Academy. During the game, their teammate Akiho trips, leading to a loss. Akiho apologizes, but Angelize, as the captain, keeps everyone motivated. Misty Rosenblum, the captain from Floria, commends Angelize for showing them the value of grace and nobility beyond just winning. Angelize vows to Misty that her team will bounce back in the fall competition. Before heading to the baptism ritual, she reassures her team of her return despite her busy schedule. Angelize's siblings, Sylvia and Giulio, watch the match. Later, while driving through a tunnel, Sylvia discusses the game, and Giulio asks Momoka if managing Angelize is always stressful as he brushes her hair. Angelize is upset because she didn't fulfill her duties as a princess. As they exit the tunnel, Giulio teasingly calls her greedy. The city is alive with holograms powered by mana, all set up to celebrate Angelize's 16th birthday. Sylvia is amazed by the numerous images of Angelize displayed everywhere. In clothing stores, young girls are trying on outfits similar to what Angelize wears. Meanwhile, Giulio's friend, Riza, lights a cigarette in the front of the car. Angelize vows to demonstrate her unique light of mana to her nation. Giulio is looking forward to the baptism ritual happening the next day. Suddenly, they see police cars near a fancy restaurant. A holographic stop sign appears, and the security car ahead of them halts. Guards emerge and quickly set up a protective barrier using light of mana, following Riza's commands. She reassures Giulio that her team will take care of the situation. Giulio explains to Angelize, Momoka, and Sylvia that the commotion is due to a girl named Sarah, who is a Norma, which surprises them. A police officer encloses Sarah with a mana barrier that emits electric bolts, making it tough to break. Despite her mother's pleas to hide her identity, Sarah breaks through the barrier. Angelize is shocked to see this, and Giulio asks if it's her first time seeing a Norma. The officer labels Sarah as Norma under the Norma Management Code. When Sarah's mother tries to protect her, the police retaliate harshly. She begs for mercy, explaining that her daughter struggles with using mana. Angelize intervenes during the incident, suggesting to Sarah's mother that having a non-Norma child might be better, which infuriates the mother to the point of throwing a milk bottle at Angelize. Fortunately, Momoka's protective mana shield blocks it. Sarah is then placed in a glass cage and taken away by police, who restrain her mother. That evening, Angelize performs the Song of Light on a palace balcony while Sylvia sleeps. As she finishes the second verse, her mother joins her in song and presents her with a ring. Meanwhile, Emperor Jurai Masurugi is programming in the dark confines of the Dawn Pillar, watched secretly by Giulio. Later, Angelize and Momoka are riding in a convertible car through the city, while her family follows in another car. Many people from the Empire of Masurugi are gathering in the streets to catch a glimpse of the princess. Even Angelize's teammates from the Iria team are there, along with others like Misty Rosenblum and Sarah's mother, who are watching the event on TV. Airships surround the Dawn Pillar as Emperor Jurai delivers a speech. Inside the pillar, a glass machine containing a cross activates, and Sophia opens it for Princess Angelize to enter. When Angelize's mana powers activate, illuminating the pillar, the machine suddenly malfunctions, causing the crowd to gasp. Akiho hears a siren, and a police officer explains it's a Norma alert. Momoka is shocked to see Angelize stuck and embarrassed in the machine. Emperor Jurai senses something is amiss. Giulio confesses to sabotaging the machine and laughs, while Riza uses her abilities to intimidate the Emperor. Giulio then reveals that Angelize is actually a Norma. As Giulio orders the capture, Sophia frees Angelize from the glass machine. Giulio directs two guards to pursue them, with Riza demanding they use real bullets, anticipating Angelize's ability to neutralize mana-based weapons. Sophia locks the doors using her powers, while Riza alerts more guards about the escape inside the Dawn Pillar. Meanwhile, Momoka finds Sylvia has fainted. Sophia and Angelize make their way through the pillar and find an exit, spotting their vehicle outside. However, as they step out, Angelize is captured in a barrier similar to Sarah's, and the guards seize Sophia. The officer informs Angelize of their suspicion that she's a Norma and advises her not to resist. Confused, Angelize walks through the barrier despite Sophia's protests, proving she is a Norma when she disrupts the light of mana. The guards aim their guns at her as Akiho weeps and Maki denies the truth. The officer orders Angelize to disarm and surrender. Clinging to her identity as the first princess, Angelize draws her ceremonial sword, prompting the panicked officer to fire. Sophia shields Angelize from a gunshot and dies in her arms, urging her to survive. Angelize is then arrested under the Norma Management Code. As she's taken away, her former admirers jeer at her. Akiho, recalling past promises, accuses Angelize of lying. The Rosenblum royal family is stunned, While Sarah's mother feels justice has been served, Giulio, taking control, organizes a funeral for his mother and aims to restore his family's honor. Emperor Jurai is also detained. Angelize's belongings, including a family photo, are discarded into the sea. A plane marked Personal Transport 107 flies towards an island. Once they arrive at the island, Angelize undergoes a photo session for official records. A woman then reads Angelize's details and informs her that she will be joining Arzeno as a soldier. Meanwhile, another woman lurks in the shadows. Confused, Angelize inquires about her mother. The first woman begins to confiscate Angelize's belongings, starting with her earrings and necklace. However, when she tries to take Angelize's ring, the second woman awakens, and Angelize becomes defensive, asserting her royal status and belittling the first woman as a lowly officer. Upset, the first woman prepares to whip Angelize. But Officer Emma Bronson intervenes, stating that she will handle Angelize since she is also a Norma. Commander Jill, in charge of Arzeno, proceeds to release Angelize from her handcuffs. Angelize can't believe she's a Norma, so Jill kicks her, causing her to fall against a cell. Jill is surprised Angelize never used mana for 16 years and questions if she found that odd. Emma explains that Angelize's maid used mana for her. Jill takes Angelize's ring during her sorrow and challenges her to use mana to get it back. When Angelize fails, Jill tells her she has no royal privileges or rights anymore. Jill then cuts Angelize's dress, restrains her with mana, and conducts a harsh search, leaving Angelize in despair. The day after arriving, Ange begins her new role as a Norma soldier. Jill, the leader, places her in the 1st Squadron, which is managed by Captain Zola, a woman who enjoys life's pleasures. Ange is also introduced to her new team members. Celia, who is quiet and serves as Zola's assistant, is assigned to oversee Ange. Ange faces a challenge when she refuses to wear a suit that once belonged to a pilot who has passed away. Upset by her refusal, Celia removes Ange's clothes and pushes her outside, leaving her exposed. Feeling embarrassed as 2 other Normas witness this, Ange finally agrees to wear the pilot's suit. Next, Ange starts training in a para-male simulator. Initially, she's puzzled by how it works, but she gradually gets the hang of it by remembering her experiences playing aerial lacrosse. The controls of the para-male remind her of the game, which helps her adjust. After a while, Zola acknowledges that Ange is performing well in her training. Celia then provides Ange with supplies and a room where she can rest. During a meal at the canteen, Zola's group reminds Ange that she is no longer a royal and should accept her new status as a Norma. Feeling overwhelmed, Ange decides to leave the canteen. Coco, one of the Normas, follows her out. Coco shares that she has grown fond of Ange and expresses her wish to visit the Mitsurugi Empire someday. As a gesture of friendship, Coco gives Ange her pudding. After returning to her room, Ange decides not to eat Coco's pudding and instead writes a letter asking to be released from her current situation. Meanwhile, Zola and Hilda engage in intimate activities on the bed. Hilda, feeling exhausted, requests a break, which prompts Zola to mock her lack of stamina. Jill, the leader, comes across Ange's petition but quickly denies her request. Disappointed and unsatisfied, Zola forcefully takes Ange to the interrogation room. There, she initiates unwanted physical contact by kissing and touching Ange while sensually licking her neck. Upset by this, Ange slaps Zola, causing her prosthetic eye to fall out. In the midst of their altercation, a command alert notifies them that a singularity portal is about to open, and the 1st Squadron is sent out on a mission. As they prepare to leave, Ange tries to escape. Celia, the lieutenant, chases after her, while Coco attempts to join Ange and return to the Mitsurugi Empire. Unfortunately, just as they reach the portal, a dragon emerges and fires a beam that instantly kills Coco. Witnessing this horrific sight leaves Ange in a state of shock and disbelief. Despite the tragic death of Coco, Ange is still determined to leave the unit. This resolve is tested when Celia points a gun at her, insisting she stays. At that moment, a large group of dragons, including 22 schooners and a massive galleon type, suddenly appear. The squadron quickly shifts their para-males into combat mode and launches an attack against the invading creatures. During the battle, Miranda mourns Coco's untimely death, but her grief is cut short as the schooners attack and kills her, which frightens Ange even more. In a critical moment of the fight, Zola tries to strike a fatal blow to the galleon-type dragon. However, Ange accidentally bumps into Zola, causing a mishap that leads to both Zola and the galleon type being destroyed. Ange survives the crash, but Zola does not. Back at the infirmary, members of Zola's unit blame Ange for the incident, holding her responsible for Zola's death. Jill then makes changes in leadership, promoting Celia to captain and Hilda to lieutenant. Jill also tells Ange that her request to return home has been denied and informs her that her family is no longer there. This leaves Ange in a difficult and isolated position within the unit. Jill assigns Ange a tough task as a form of punishment. She has to carry the tombstones of her fallen comrades to the cemetery. This job takes a toll on Ange, pushing her to the brink of emotional instability. and she starts to lose the will to live. Seeing Ange's despair and also facing a shortage of paramale units, Jill decides to give her a chance to pilot a very old paramale that is often overlooked by other pilots. With this unique paramale, the unit sets out to confront their previous enemy. During the mission, a galleon-type dragon targets and aggressively attacks Ange. Initially, Ange feels like giving up and embracing death, but she suddenly remembers her dying mother's last wish for her to live a strong life. This memory triggers a powerful response in Ange, and she activates the assault mode of her paramale, called Vilcus, and successfully destroys the galleon-type dragon. After the battle, Ange visits the Arzeno cemetery, where she reflects on her past life and her family. In a symbolic act of leaving her past behind, she cuts her hair and makes a firm commitment to do whatever it takes to survive. After she comes back to her room, Ange spots the pudding given by Coco offered her earlier in trash and tries to eat the pudding, only to find out it has spoiled. Later in the evening, Jill has a conversation with a girl about how Ange was able to control Vilcus. Jill then tells the girl about her plan to start her own mission called Libertas and asks for Celia's advice. Celia remembers the last battle with the dragons, where Ange fought alone against a big dragon. She tells Jill that she believes she can operate Vilcus even better than Ange. However, Jill stops her and advises the girls to keep the mission quiet. After completing their mission, the squadron collects their rewards. Hilda proudly shows off her earnings to the girl, but she becomes jealous when she sees that Ange has earned the most. Upset by Ange's arrogance, Hilda and her friends try to bully her, but their attempts are unsuccessful. Meanwhile, Celia spends her time reading a book about leadership, and Vivian starts to develop feelings for Ange. However, it is revealed that Celia secretly wishes to pilot the Vilcus. At Jasmine's shopping center, Ange picks out a new uniform for herself. Jasmine tries to give her advice because people don't like Ange, but Ange doesn't pay attention to her. Later, while Ange is having a meal by herself in the cafeteria, Vivian attempts to give her a keychain as a friendly gesture. However, Ange gets upset and refuses to take it. Meanwhile, Hilda takes over Zola Axberg's living quarters and, as a symbolic move to let go of the past, she throws away Zola's artificial eyeball. Afterward, she goes to the hangar and starts to work on a plan involving the Vilcus. During their flying mission, the squadron keeps their formation until Ange decides to move ahead on her own. Even though Vilcus starts to malfunction, Ange manages to switch it into assault mode. Suddenly, a schooner attacks and they end up wrestling in the sea. The struggle continues until Ange's cockpit fills up with water, causing her to lose consciousness. When Ange wakes up, she finds herself tied up on a bed without any clothes on, and there's an unfamiliar boy sleeping next to her. This unexpected situation leaves Ange in a confusing and vulnerable state. Upon waking up, Ange is shocked to find herself tied up and unclothed, with a young man, also scantily dressed, sleeping next to her. She reacts violently, attacking him even as he tries to clarify what happened to them. Back at Arzeno, Jill senses trouble and instructs Celia to organize a team to find and rescue Ange. Ange manages to free herself and makes her way to the beach where her aircraft, the Vilcus, is parked. She soon realizes that the cause of the Vilcus' earlier technical issues was Hilda's underwear, which had somehow ended up in the engine. The young man tries to catch up with her, leading to more conflicts between them, culminating in Ange restraining him. As the weather turns and rain begins to pour, Ange seeks refuge in the nearby forest. Unfortunately, her situation worsens when a snake bites her, causing her to lose consciousness due to the venom. The young man comes to her rescue, removing the venom from her leg by sucking it out and then taking her to his shelter. While they are at the shelter, the boy takes care of Ange and starts fixing the Vilcus. During this time, he reminisces about his own past tragedies, including the loss of his parents and a poignant memory of Jill, who once approached him while injured, with the Vilcus trailing behind her. This series of events unfolds as Ange and the boy navigate their precarious circumstances, each dealing with their personal struggles and histories. The young man reveals his name to be Tusk, though he keeps his full identity a secret. Tusk and Ange begin to get to know each other while stranded on the island. Their time together, however, is abruptly disrupted when they spot a fleet in the sky and a sea vessel known as a schooner launching an attack against them. Ange bravely confronts the schooner to protect themselves while Tusk works diligently to repair the Vilcus, their only means of escape. During the intense battle, Ange starts to lose hope, but a surprising turn of events occurs when the Vilcus activates in response to the magical energy emanating from her ring. The aircraft fires at the schooner, and in a desperate effort, Ange attacks it repeatedly until it is completely destroyed. As the first light of dawn breaks, Ange formally introduces herself to Tusk, just as the rescue team sent from Arzeno arrives to retrieve them. Before leaving the island, Tusk takes a moment to honor the memory of his fallen comrades. He then departs from the island aboard in a paramale. The day after, a mysterious maid-like figure secretly sneaks onto the supply transport heading towards Arzeno. Meanwhile, Ange and the girls are heading somewhere when suddenly the intruder alarm goes on. Upon checking, Ange is taken aback by the unexpected arrival of her maid Momoka. After recognizing Ange, Momoka runs and hugs Ange. Meanwhile, at the head unit, Emma is talking to the committee about Momoka, and it looks like the committee wants Momoka out of the picture since they do not want her to let the public know about Normas and the dragons. The unit assigns Momoka to Ange's care during her stay at Arzeno. Despite Momoka's excitement to reunite with Ange, Ange's demeanor turns cold and she harbors resentment towards her. This is because Momoka knows that Ange is a Norma, a person without the ability to use mana, but has kept this truth hidden from her. Despite Ange's mistreatment and resentment, Momoka continues to assist and support her. Even while bathing together, Momoka expresses her unwavering dedication to serving Ange. Worried about Momoka's safety after she learns classified information about Arzeno and the dangerous dragons, Ange urges Momoka to leave. However, their time together is abruptly interrupted when Ange is summoned to join an offensive mission. The following day, Momoka prepares to leave Arzeno, but at the last moment, Ange surprises her by offering her savings to buy Momoka's freedom. Jill, the leader of Arzeno, agrees to cancel the transport, allowing Momoka to stay by Ange's side once again. Momoka is overjoyed by this unexpected turn of events, grateful that she can continue to be with Ange despite the challenges they face. Ange has a habit of fighting alone, which makes everyone else on the team earn less money as a result. This upsets Celia and the rest of the team. Celia suggests that Ange should be forbidden from using Vilcus, but Jill disagrees with this idea. To help relieve her stress, Celia finds solace in a fitting room at Jasmine's mall, where she cosplays as a magical girl from a book she enjoys reading. At the same time, Ange goes shopping for clothes for Momoka. Unfortunately, due to a mistake by Jasmine, Ange ends up going into the same room that Celia is using and discovers her peculiar hobby. This embarrasses Celia a great deal. At the bathhouse, Celia attempts to attack Ange to keep her cosplay hobby a secret. Ange defends herself, and during the fight, Celia accuses Ange of being selfish because she won't cooperate with her teammates. Ange responds by saying that everyone seems to want her gone, and Celia hasn't done anything to stop them from bullying her. As a result of their altercation, both Celia and Ange are scolded for fighting with each other. Additionally, Ange ends up catching a cold because she stayed in the bath too long. Meanwhile, Celia has a conversation with Zhao Mei, who is busy fixing Vilcus. During their talk, Zhao Mei figures out that Ange doesn't want any of her teammates to get hurt, which is why she takes on all the risk by herself when fighting the dragons. This revelation surprises Celia, and it helps her understand why Ange always chooses to fight alone. Intrigued by this new insight, Celia checks her battle diary and realizes that there haven't been any team casualties since Ange started piloting Vilcus. Ange's team embarks on a mission to defeat a massive dragon-like creature known as a Bighorn-class dragon without her due to her illness. The team's eagerness to claim the reward money leads them to disregard Celia's warnings, and they're quickly overwhelmed by the dragon's powerful gravity field, leaving them immobile and defenseless. Just as all hope seems lost, Ange arrives on the scene, piloting her trusty Vilcus mech. Following Celia's guidance, Ange targets the dragon's vulnerable left horn, successfully disabling its gravity field and freeing her teammate. With renewed strength, the team works together to defeat the dragon, securing a triumphant victory. Back at their base, they celebrate their success and receive the reward money. Celia takes the opportunity to address the team's internal conflicts, emphasizing that Ange's bravery and quick thinking saved them all. The team reconciles, putting aside their differences except for Hilda, who still harbors hate towards Ange. They unwind together in the bathhouse, enjoying each other's company. The next day, Momoka intercepts an urgent message from Sylvia, Ange's sister, inquiring about Ange's whereabouts. However, their communication is cut short as Sylvia is dragged away, leaving Ange worried and concerned for her sister's safety. The sudden interruption raises more questions than answers, leaving Ange and her team to wonder what's happening to Sylvia. A few days pass, and finally, the much-awaited festival day arrives. Celia explains to Ange that this special festival happens once a year to give the Normas a break from their rigorous training. At the same time, Emma is having a conversation with Misty, who has come to visit the island. Misty mentions she knows Ange is there and asks Emma to help her find Ange. While all the girls are having a great time at the festival, Ange is sitting with Momoka, feeling nostalgic about her sister Sylvia. Suddenly, Momoka receives a call from Emma. Emma tells her that Misty is looking to meet with Ange, but Ange isn't interested in meeting anyone. She decides to put on a costume to keep her identity hidden and tells Momoka to pretend she doesn't know her to keep her disguise safe. Meanwhile, Emma is searching everywhere for Ange. During this time, Ange ends up being a hero. She sees a girl about to fall and quickly steps in to help her because the girl reminds her of her own sister. This act of kindness shows how caring Ange can be, despite her efforts to stay undercover at the festival. As Ange walked around, she stumbled upon a couple of girls misbehaving and causing trouble. She quickly intervened and scared them away, making sure they understood the consequences of their actions. Feeling a bit tired, Ange decided to take a moment to relax. As she lay down, she couldn't help but think about her dear sister Sylvia and how much she missed her. Suddenly, Ange noticed something that caught her attention. She saw her kingdom's emblem on an airship nearby. Meanwhile, Jasmine, one of the girls, made an exciting announcement. She declared that there would be a contest with a grand prize of $1 million. This news created a buzz of excitement among the girls. On the other hand, Ange managed to find her way into Misty's room. Even though there were security measures in place, Misty was relieved to see Ange and confessed that she had come to the fleet because she believed that Ange was not a Norma. However, Ange proved her wrong and showed that she indeed possessed the abilities of a Norma. While all this was happening, the other girls were engrossed in the contest, enjoying themselves and competing against each other. Ange, who was determined to escape, threatened Misty to help her. During their escape, Misty revealed a shocking piece of information. She disclosed that the Mitsurugi royal family would soon face execution. Meanwhile, Hilda takes Momoka to the airship and asks her to fly it with the help of Mana or she will shoot her. Just then, Ange also arrives with Misty and then it's revealed both girls are trying to run away. So, Hilda steps up and plans to partner up so they can leave together because she is the only one who can sneak out the airship. On the other hand, Chris has won the $1 million and she reveals that she wants to eat something good with Hilda and Rosalie. In the meantime, Momoka is piloting the airship while Hilda uses her pin to unlock the ship. Hilda rushes towards the plane but Ange tells Momoka to take off. Ange reveals that she doesn't believe her because what she did to her. However, Hilda doesn't give up and sticks to the airship saying that she waited for years and something about her mother. Listening to this, Ange changes her mind and help her get into the airship. Seeing this, Emma faints and the following day, the soldiers find the ship with Misty in it. Later, Hilda and Ange part ways and Hilda tells her not to die. Once upon a time, when Hilda was younger, she lived a happy life with her mother on apple farms. They enjoyed their days together, surrounded by the beauty of nature. But one fateful day, everything took a drastic turn. The police suddenly arrived and took Hilda away, separating her from her mother. Fast forward to the present, Hilda finds herself in a precarious situation. She is running away after stealing a dress from a store. Meanwhile, Ange and Momoka hatch a plan to sneak into a building and make their getaway on a paramail, a type of vehicle. However, they realize that Akiho, someone they know, is present with the other vehicles. To avoid any complications, Ange decides to startle Akiho, which frightens her greatly. Despite the initial shock, Ange tries to reason with Akiho, hoping for understanding and cooperation. However, Akiho pretends to comprehend but secretly tries to contact the authorities when she believes Ange isn't looking. Sensing Akiho's betrayal, Ange takes action to prevent her from alerting the authorities. She restrains Akiho and takes control of the vehicle. In this moment, Ange expresses her gratitude towards Momoka for remaining steadfast and not changing her loyalty. Hilda goes back home and meets her mother. But here's the thing, her mother doesn't recognize her and mistakes her for a friend. It's a bit confusing for Hilda. Back to Ange, she manages to escape from the cops who were called by Akiho. But the cops are still on their tails and they try to catch them using nets. Luckily, Ange dodges them in the nick of time and finds a secret passage that leads to the royal castle. Once they reach the palace, the girls find themselves surrounded again. And to make matters worse, they have Sylvia as a hostage. Meanwhile, Hilda's mom offers her some pie and tea, when suddenly a child who looks just like Hilda appears. The mother mistakenly calls her Hilda, which confuses our main character even more. Hilda finally reveals that she is, in fact, her daughter. This revelation shocks Hilda's younger sister so much that she faints. And then, the mother throws the pie at Hilda and tells her to leave, promising not to tell anyone. Back to Ange, who is fighting the royal guards and asks Sylvia to come to her. Sylvia is happy to see her sister, but surprisingly she tries to stab her. Seeing this, Ange is surprised while Sylvia reveals her true colors, showing that she loathes her for being born. Ange is in full shock when the guards trap her with Momoka and Julio appears and informs her about her trial. On the other hand, the poor Hilda is also arrested by the cops. Later, Ange finds herself bound by Julio while Sylvia lashes out at her with a whip, hurling insults as the townspeople watch. The crowd, including Akiho and other girls, also blame Ange for causing trouble in their lives. Momoka, witnessing the harsh treatment, pleads with Sylvia to stop, but Julio interrupts. He confesses that he tricked Momoka into bringing Ange back to face her tragic fate. Standing before the crowd, Julio declares that Ange will be executed and announces the overthrow of their father to establish his own rule. Amidst this chaos, Ange, overwhelmed by disbelief, begins to understand the harshness with which people treat Normas like her. Remembering her mother's advice, she bravely walks towards the gallows, singing as she faces her grim reality. Julio gets all worked up and tells them to hurry up with the execution. But just as Ange is about to be hanged, boom, a bright flash appears out of nowhere and saves her. Turns out, it's Tusk. He shows up just in the nick of time to rescue Ange. Momoka and Ange help each other out and escape by throwing bombs. They, along with Tusk, run away from the Empire, and Ange even manages to hurt Julio's face with a thrown blade. Later on, while they're on their way to Arzeno, Ange wakes up and gets mad at Tusk for being a pervert. There's a bit of misunderstanding, but then Tusk spills the beans. He's actually a knight of Vilkas, and it was his duty to save Ange. He even reveals that Jill asked him to do it. When they finally reach the island, Tusk leaves, and Jill punches Ange right in the gut. She passes out and wakes up later in a cell without any clothes on. Celia and Ursha explain that Ange is being imprisoned for a week because she tried to escape. While in cell, she finds Hilda laying there with a messed up face. The both girls tell each other about their experiences and laughs about it. However, Ange reveals her new plan to destroy the world once they are released. Listening to this, Hilda also agrees and steps up to help her. Ange starts singing the same song she sang during her execution, and the entire Arzeno staff hears it. In the middle of the night, Sylvia wakes up and gets really disturbed after everything that happened with Ange during the execution. She decides to go to Julio's room to talk to him about it. But when she gets there, she sees Julio and Riza in a moment that seems kinda romantic. Julio even calls Riza Mama and starts explaining to her how Ange is causing problems for their plans. Then, something really strange happens. Riza puts drops of this weird liquid into Julio's mouth, and all of a sudden, Sylvia sees Riza transform into a monster with wings and a tail. It's like something out of a scary movie. And then, Riza uses her tail to strangle poor Sylvia, who screams for help. Meanwhile, Celia is being praised and looked up to by her younger teammates who want to be just like her when they grow up. All of a sudden, May arrives and the girls start talking about a past incident. They discuss how Jill, who was known as Electra back then, returned to Arzeno with a serious injury, and her right arm was completely severed. A young Celia and May were the ones who discovered Jill's condition, and Celia made a promise to avenge Jill and their friends who had lost their lives while fighting against a dragon. As the years went by, Celia herself suffered severe injuries, and Jill strictly forbade her from using the legendary paramail called Vilkas because Celia didn't have something necessary to fly it. Back in the present moment, Celia is really hopeful that she'll be able to fully operate Vilkas. But then, out of nowhere, a strange portal opens up right above Arzeno, and a song starts playing from it. Suddenly, a large group of schooner-type dragons storm into the base. Along with the schooners, 3 paramails also show up. The red paramail, which seems to be leading the group, unleashes a powerful beam. This beam causes a massive destruction, wiping out a large part of Arzeno and the island. Unfortunately, many people are killed by this devastating attack. Celia's team is sent to stop the enemies, but Celia doesn't listen to Jill's warning and decides to use the Vilkas anyway. Jill then orders the release of Hilda and Ange. Ange takes control of the Vilkas and starts fighting the mysterious paramail in a fair battle. Suddenly, the mysterious paramail stops and its pilot starts singing. Ange responds by singing as well, and her ring begins to glow, causing the Vilkas to react. As their attacks clash in the air, Ange confronts the pilot and seems to see their shared history and connection. The pilot quickly leaves, telling Ange that the truth lies with the aura. The mysterious paramails, along with the dragons, retreat, and Celia discovers that Ange is the actual pilot of the Vilkas. After the invasion, Jill assesses the condition of Arzeno, while Vivian enjoys lying on her bed, even though the room is destroyed. After all that excitement, it seems like things are starting to calm down a bit. The battle was intense, but Ange's discovery and the retreat of the enemies bring some relief. Celia must be surprised to find out that Ange is the true pilot of the Vilkas, and it's good to see Jill checking on the condition of Arzeno, even though it must be quite a mess. As for Vivian, well, sometimes it's nice to just relax on your bed, even if the room is in ruins. In a stunningly beautiful location, Julio, along with world leaders, gathers to discuss the recent dragon attacks on Arzeno. However, they find themselves disagreeing with Julio due to their different viewpoints, leading to a slight argument. Nearby, a blonde man named Embryo, who is sitting under a tree reading a book, joins the conversation. Embryo, who is also one of the leaders, suggests 3 unusual strategies. The first strategy is to give up and surrender to the dragons. The second is to completely eliminate the dragons. And the third, most radical idea is to destroy the current world and create a new one. The other world leaders are taken aback by these extreme options but find themselves without any better ideas to counter the dragon threat. Reluctantly, they agree to consider Embryo's proposals. Following this agreement, Embryo hands over some keys to Julio. While the girls at Arzeno are busy rebuilding their fleet, Jill assigns Hilda the role of squadron captain. This decision comes after Celia is detained for disobeying orders and taking the Vilkas without permission. Jill instructs the girls to continue with their tasks, but Ange feels frustrated because she wants to understand everything that has been happening. Later on, while relaxing at the hot spring, Ange seizes the opportunity to ask Jill about various pressing issues. She inquires about Tusk, the history of the world, the origins of humans' ability to use mana, the reasons behind the discrimination against Normans, and why her song affects the Vilkas. Jill explains that long ago, due to destructive wars among humans, a being referred to as God decided to create a new version of humans, these ones infused with mana. However, as time went on, girls started being born without mana and were sent to places like Arzeno. Additionally, humans eventually managed to get their hands on Vilkas, a powerful weapon. Initially, anyone who tried to operate Vilkas would die because it was locked. It wasn't until Electra, the first princess of the Gallia Empire, came along that its hidden potential was unlocked. Unfortunately, even she suffered from the experience, losing her arm. Jill shares that with Ange's help, they hope to achieve their plan named Libertas. However, when Maggie is asked for help, she shows no interest and declines to assist, as Ange was pressing Jill for answers about the dragons. Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden discovery of a dragon survivor within the base. To everyone's surprise, the dragon turned out to be Vivian, who began humming Ange's song. Recognizing the tune, Ange joined in, singing along with Vivian, who was still in her dragon form. This act somehow triggered Vivian's transformation back into her human form. This revelation made Ange realize that dragons were actually transformed humans. Devastated by the sight of a group of dragons being burned, Ange made a heartfelt decision. She vowed that she would no longer kill dragons or pilot the Vilkas, deeply affected by the truth of their origin. However, just as she was grappling with these revelations, a fleet approached Arzeno. Leading the fleet was Giulio, aboard the bigger ship. As Giulio's ships drew closer to Arzeno, they claimed to be offering assistance and relief. However, Jill, the leader of Arzeno, instructed everyone to remain silent and prepare for defense. It was at this moment that Operation Libertas was initiated, witnessing the preparations for defense. Giulio ordered his fleet to attack Arzeno. Jill, aware of the impending danger, assigned Celia to protect Ange and directed May to take the Vilkas underground. May and her team descended to a submarine that had been secretly built beneath Arzeno. Meanwhile, Giulio's soldiers infiltrated Arzeno and launched attacks against its inhabitants. As the events unfold, Ange's determination grows stronger, and she becomes defiant towards Celia. Together with Momoka, they manage to escape and seek refuge in the cafeteria. Unfortunately, Giulio's troops target Momoka, but Ange bravely steps in, drawing their attention away from her friend. She then proceeds to interrogate one of the soldiers to gather information. Feeling a surge of courage, Ange makes up her mind to confront Giulio directly using the power of the Vilkas. With a newfound resolve, she activates the Vilkas, causing it to undergo a transformation, turning it into a striking red color. Ange fearlessly fights against the soldiers and their mana-powered weapons as she makes her way towards Giulio. Despite Celia's objections, Ange expresses her growing attachment to Arzeno and her determination to protect it. In an effort to neutralize Celia, Ange incapacitates her. While being attacked by enemy forces, Ange notices a protective light barrier surrounding the Vilkas. She eventually faces Giulio and is on the verge of defeating him when Embryo intervenes. Using his Black Angel Ragna Mail, Embryo steps in to stop Ange. He then sings to unleash a powerful attack that not only kills Giulio but also destroys his naval fleet. Miraculously, Ange survives the attack from Embryo, who then turns his attention towards Tusk and Vivian. Embryo sings once more, prompting Ange to act quickly to save Tusk. In response, she transforms the Vilkas again. This time it takes on a blue hue. As the Black Angel launches its attack, the Vilkas, along with Tusk and Vivian, vanish mysteriously. Meanwhile, back at Arzeno, the submarine under Jill's command is finally ready. Ange wakes up in an unfamiliar location and encounters Tusk and Vivian, who has transformed into a dragon once again. They speculate that they have somehow ended up in a different dimension, far away from Arzeno. Tusk explains that the Vilkas has the ability to travel between these different dimensions. Curious about their surroundings, Ange goes on a reconnaissance trip through the dimensions. She is astonished to come across Aknomi Hashira in the Mitsurugi Empire, but her attention is immediately drawn to a demolished and deserted house. Ange and Tusk, guided by an automatic robot, come across a building that appears to be a shelter. Upon entering what is known as the Capital Third Shelter, a management computer named Himawari activates. Himawari reveals that the population has plummeted to 11% due to a massive world war known as Ragnarok. This devastating conflict occurred between the Association of Unification Economy and the Half-Continent Alliance Organization, involving powerful nations on a grand scale. The situation escalated to the point where a weapon called Ragna Mail was deployed. This weapon, known for its overwhelming dimensional resonance capability, was used to bring an end to the standoff, effectively concluding the war. However, the use of Ragna Mail had dire consequences. The reaction furnaces on Earth exploded, rendering the planet nearly uninhabitable due to the severe environmental damage. This catastrophic event took place 538 years ago. Himawari also informs Ange and Tusk that they are the only two surviving humans on the planet. Struggling to come to terms with this grim reality, Ange finds it hard to accept their situation and vents her frustration on those around her. Ange is curious about what happened to her colleagues from Arzeno. Tusk explains that they had been fighting to free people from the control of a powerful figure named Embryo. Despite their efforts, Ange feels that their struggles might have been in vain, which creates some tension between her and Tusk. However, Ange manages to smooth things over by giving Tusk a gift and apologizing for her earlier behavior. Later on, they discover a room that has been well maintained and decide to make it their new home. In this room, Tusk shares more about Embryo, revealing that he is a supreme leader who has secretly controlled humanity. Tusk refers to Embryo as the main enemy of their kind, the ancient humans. During their time in the room, Ange and Tusk enjoy some peaceful moments together, which helps strengthen their relationship. Tusk credits Ange with helping him rediscover his purpose. Their peace is abruptly interrupted when two mysterious women riding a dragon crash into their house. One of the women addresses Ange and Tusk, calling them false citizens and welcoming them to what she claims is the true Earth. Ange, Tusk, Vivian, and their powerful Vilcus are suddenly transported by these creatures called dragons to a castle located in the mountains. Unfortunately, Vivian gets hit by a dart and is taken away by unknown individuals. Ange and Tusk, on the other hand, are escorted to meet the High Priestess and her council. During this encounter, Ange's anger gets the best of her, and Tusk faces intense scrutiny. It seems like a pretty tough situation for them. But then, something unexpected happens. Salamandine, the pilot that Ange met back at Arzeno, comes forward and offers them help and a glimpse into their world. This act of kindness provides a glimmer of hope in an otherwise grim situation. Salamandine invites Ange and Tusk to experience their hospitality and explore this new world they have found themselves in. During this tea ceremony, Ange starts to lose her patience and decides to try and take their hostess hostage. However, Salamandine steps in and not only shows Ange how they managed to survive on their Earth, but also reveals the source of the mana of light and the truth behind the war between Arzeno, the dragons, and Embryo. Ange, driven by her emotions, attempts to attack Salamandine, but her efforts are quickly thwarted, and she finds herself waking up in a hospital bed. To her surprise, she discovers that Vivian, who is now fully human, is taking care of her. It turns out that Dr. Gecko adjusted Vivian's dragon gene, allowing her to control her transformations. While Ange and Vivian are in the hospital, they hear Tusk's voice coming from the next room. Curious, they investigate and find Tusk strapped to a table, surrounded by a group of young dragons. Dr. Gecko expresses gratitude to Tusk for cooperating, explaining that humanoid males are few, and they have learned a lot about reproduction, much to Ange's anger. After the hospital incident, Ange and Vivian go to meet Salamandine and another dragon female who turns out to be Vivian's mother. The dragon community is excited about Vivian's return and decides to organize a festival to celebrate it. During the festival, Salamandine's guards approach Ange and Tusk. They express a desire to learn more about Ange and Tusk and their world, and they also want Ange and Tusk to learn about their own ways. This exchange of knowledge seems to be an important part of the festival. Amidst the festivities, Tusk brings up a serious question to Ange. He asks her if they really need to go back to their own Earth. Ange finds herself unsure and doesn't have an immediate answer to Tusk's question. Riza gives Omiko an update, telling her that they have detected the aura's activity underground in the Masurugi Empire. Hearing this, Omiko decides that it's the right moment to take back the powerful Mother Aura. She instructs Riza to stick to the planned schedule, making sure everything lines up with the opening of the singular point. Omiko emphasizes that the upcoming battle is crucial and will decide the future of their planet. Meanwhile, Ange finds herself waking up in a room where she sees Tusk tied up. She quickly frees him from his bonds. Just as they are adjusting to the situation, Salamandine, Naga, and Kanem come into the room to meet them. Vivian is enjoying her breakfast and chatting with her mother, Lamia, when Ange and her group join them. Ange is a bit suspicious. She worries that the food might be poisoned, and she's also unsure if Lamia really is Vivian's mother. After breakfast, at Salamandine's suggestion, they all head to a nearby stadium. Ange is amazed to see that the stadium is still in great shape, despite being very old. Kanem explains to Ange that the stadium is over 500 years old and it's Salamandine's efforts that have kept it in such good condition. Salamandine then proposes a challenge to Ange. If Ange wins, she doesn't have to join them in their fight against Embryo, but if she loses, she'll have to help them. They decide to compete in various sports like tennis, baseball, and golf. As they play these different sports together, Ange and Salamandine start to build a friendship, learning more about each other and gaining mutual respect. Salamandine tells Ange that she's really glad to see Ange standing up for herself. She has a big smile on her face, something no one else has seen before. Sala explains to Ange that as leaders, their duty is to protect their citizens. However, Ange disagrees and expresses her own negative opinion, which goes against Sala's beliefs. This creates a tense atmosphere between them as they clash over their differing perspectives. Meanwhile, Vivian is overjoyed to be reunited with her family. She goes back to her parents' home for the first time in many years, and they spend quality time together in peace. However, their peaceful reunion is abruptly interrupted by the sudden appearance of an unstable singular point. This abnormal situation puts everyone on edge. In response, Salamandine takes an offensive stance, trying to help the people in need. Ange, on the other hand, takes control of the unfinished Vilcus to assist Vivian in this challenging situation. While witnessing the incident, Tusk recognizes the familiar signs of Embryo's presence, reminding him of the tragic event when his parents were killed. Although Salamandine is confused, she agrees to Ange's proposal of neutralizing the effects of her weapon, the Convergence Space-Time Gun. They plan to achieve this by combining the power of the Vilcus Dimension Gun and closing the singular point. As this plan unfolds, Salamandine realizes the importance of her role as a leader. She opens up to Ange, expressing her desire to build trust and support each other as good friends. They both agree to be friends, and Ange affectionately gives Salamandine the nickname Salako since she struggles to pronounce her full name. However, when Salamandine suggests calling Ange Enko, which Ange politely declines. In the hot springs, Sala shares with Ange that she has found Aura deep underground in the Mitsurugi Empire. She explains that they need to gather all their forces and travel through a singular point to take back Aura from the Mitsurugi Empire. Sala expresses her trust in Ange's decisions and mentions how happy she would be to join Ange on the battlefield. Following this, Tusk adds his opinion, suggesting that it might be a good idea to collaborate with the dragons in the fight. However, Ange feels uneasy about the whole situation. She has grown skeptical and finds it hard to trust anyone after being deceived so many times. Ange reflects on the irony of her situation, noting how odd it is for her, a former princess, to consider invading the Mitsurugi Empire. Tusk tells Ange that she should follow her heart and assures her that he will support her as best as he can. Ange feels comforted by Tusk's positive words. However, there is an unfortunate incident where Tusk behaves inappropriately towards Ange, leading her to throw him into the river, causing him to get seriously hurt. Later, while enjoying their lunch, Lamia expresses gratitude towards Ange. Due to Tusk's injuries, he is invited by the dragon women to have dinner with them. This makes Ange feel jealous as she notices Tusk's interest in the dragon women. She reacts by making a threatening gesture towards them and then creates a space for just the two of them, taking care of Tusk's needs. Tusk appreciates the meal Ange serves him and comments that it's the best. Ange feels a strong connection with the people of Arzeno. She admires how they can live happily and peacefully without relying on mana. Because of this, Ange decides to go back to Arzeno. She considers it a comfortable place to live, and she also wants to reunite with Momoka, who is waiting for her there. After Ange makes her decision, Sala arrives and expresses her respect for Ange's choices. Sala also mentions that she is in debt to Ange and wants to continue the games they used to play once they defeat Embryo. Lamia, who is Vivian's mother, is happy to see how much Vivian has grown. She advises Vivian to cherish the friends she has made during her journey of personal growth. Vivian decides to go back to where her friends are, and she promises her mother, Lamia, that she will return to her. Before the war begins, Dr. Gecko expresses his curiosity about Tusk's body, but Ange interrupts their conversation. Omiko then decides it's time to inform Embryo about the threat posed by the descendants of Aura. This triggers an attack. Ange, Tusk, and Vivian head towards the singularity point and set off for the world they used to live in. Along the way, Tusk and Ange talk about their dreams, like wanting to open a coffee shop together, and they hope for a peaceful world in the future. However, when the singularity point opens, they realize that they are not in the skies of the Mitsurugi Empire as they had planned. They soon discover that they have been ambushed. Riza finds herself trapped in a dark and grim torture chamber within the Mitsurugi Empire. Here, Embryo, a powerful figure, forcefully extracts vital information about the army's tactics from her. This crucial information helps Embryo prevent an attack from Sala's troops. As a result, Sala's forces find themselves at a disadvantage and are pushed back. Faced with uncertainty and not knowing what her next move should be, Sala decides to retreat, taking advice from her allies, Ange and Tusk. Determined to help Sala, Ange chooses to stay behind and engage in battle, buying Sala enough time to safely reach the singularity point. Thanks to Ange's efforts, Sala manages to escape to the other Earth. During the conflict, Ange finds herself fighting against a group of attackers. To her shock, she recognizes them as Celia, Ursha, and Chris, her former colleagues from Arzeno. They are under Embryo's control and attempt to capture Ange, but their plan is thwarted by the timely intervention of Tusk and Vivian. In a critical moment, Ange uses the Vilcus, a powerful machine, to teleport herself back to Arzeno to avoid capture. Upon arrival, Arzeno appears empty and deserted. Just as the silence becomes overwhelming, someone shows up. In a heartwarming turn of events, Ange is finally reunited with Momoka. On the ship called the Aurora, Jill learns from Ange that she has traveled from beyond the Singularity Point, a sort of portal connecting different worlds. Ange also tells her about a parallel world where humans have the ability to change their genetic makeup. However, Jill is somewhat skeptical about all of this information. Jill thinks deeply and suggests that in order to change the current situation, they should work together with the dragons. She explains that the dragons have a specific goal. They want to recapture Aura. If they succeed, the Singularity Point will no longer function because it will lose all its energy. During this discussion, Tusk shares that the Aurora was originally built by ancient humans. Their purpose was to use it in their fight against Embryo, a powerful enemy. Hilda adds to the conversation by explaining that Jill's plan, known as the Libertas Operation, aims to liberate the Norma, a group of people, from Embryo's control and from the destinies that have been forced upon them. The following day, Jill agrees to go ahead with Ange's idea and starts to detail the plan for a distraction tactic. The main goal of this operation is to take control of a strategic location known as the Colon of Dawn, where both Aura and Embryo are currently located. Despite this, Jill views the dragons merely as a necessary loss to ensure the success of the Libertas plan. She firmly believes that the team should not focus on alleviating the dragons' suffering. Ange, upset and frustrated by Jill's perspective, declares that if that's the case, Jill will have to implement the plan without her help. In response, Jill takes drastic measures by capturing Momoka and using her as leverage. She threatens Ange, hoping to force her into cooperating with the plan despite her objections. Jill confirms that everything is going according to the plan and mentions that the Vilcus is the most powerful weapon they have to defeat Embryo. Meanwhile, Tusk uses a clever trick by releasing a harmful gas, which he had secretly set up earlier, and uses this opportunity to escape with Ange, rejecting Jill's strategy. However, as they try to get away, they encounter Jill blocking their path on the flight deck. After a confrontation where Ange manages to overcome Jill, Ange makes a firm decision. She resolves to fight on behalf of those who have placed their trust in her. With this new determination, she boards her Vilcus, launches from the flight deck, and begins her attacks. Tusk's plane is fiercely attacked by Ursha and Chris, which puts Momoka in great danger of falling into the sea. However, she manages to save herself by using a special power called Mana. In response, Ange bravely defends against the enemy's assault, allowing the Aurora, their ship, to prepare for escape. Thanks to Jasmine's command, the Aurora successfully makes its way into the safety of the sea. Ange, curious about what happened to Ursha and Chris, tries to ask them, but they refuse to share any details and quickly withdraw. This leaves Ange feeling a mixture of relief and concern. She immediately rushes to rescue Momoka, but Celia, who had been waiting for the right moment, surprises Ange with an unexpected attack. Celia deactivates her stealth mode, making herself visible, and shoots Ange with a tranquilizer gun. Ange suddenly wakes up in her room in the Mitsurugi Empire, which looks exactly the same as when she used to live there before being exiled. She reunites with Momoka, and together they relish the familiar life they once had when Ange was the princess of the Mitsurugi Empire. While going through her belongings, Ange discovers a letter from Embryo, which makes her realize that the current situation she finds herself in is a result of Embryo's actions. Determined to confront Embryo, Ange decides to go after him and launch an attack. However, her plans are interrupted when Celia, the leader of the Diamond Rose Knights, appears and disrupts Ange's intentions. Ange tries to understand what happened to Celia, and Celia reveals that after being abandoned by Jill and Ange, she found support from Embryo. She further confesses that she has developed feelings for Embryo, as she believes he recognizes her worth, unlike Jill, who no longer sees any value in her. Upon hearing this, Ange and Celia engage in a heated argument and battle. Eventually, Ange manages to shake off her pursuers and escape the situation. After leaving her room, Ange encounters the children she knew from the elementary school in Arzeno. In the palace garden of Mitsurugi, she runs into Ursha, who shares that she now runs a kindergarten sponsored by Embryo. Ursha explains that she supports Embryo because he has the power to bring deceased children back to life. She believes in Embryo's vision of creating a peaceful world for children and vows to do everything she can to protect them. Near a tree, Ange meets Chris and asks her to show her the way to where Embryo is located, the place Ange intends to visit. Later, she reunites with her younger sister, Sylvia, whom she had last seen in the library. In that place, Sylvia angrily whips Riza as punishment. Despite being degraded, Riza growls at Sylvia, which only leads to more punishment. Sylvia shouts at her, reminding her that she is only alive because Embryo allows it. Just then, Ange and Momo arrive and are shocked by the disturbing scene. As soon as Sylvia sees Ange's face, she becomes frightened. Later, Embryo meets with Ange and then leaves in a car, leaving Mitsurugi behind. In the meeting room, Jill expresses concerns about what happened to the Libertas and feels regret over the loss of Ange, who is crucial to the continuation of their plan. Hilda notices that the atmosphere on the ship is tense and shares a plan with Rosalie to try and rescue Ange. At the Iknomi Hashira, Ange acknowledges the existence of the aura and demands that Embryo set it free. However, Embryo refuses and explains that the aura is vital for maintaining peace in human society. This angers Ange, leading her to see Embryo as her enemy. She attempts to kill Embryo by shooting him repeatedly, but he keeps coming back to life. Embryo reveals himself as a tuner of time and tries to hypnotize Ange, but when he kisses her, an image flashes in her mind, breaking the spell. Ange bites him, declaring that her heart will never be empty no matter what. Surprisingly, this makes Embryo happy, as he claims to have been waiting for her for a long time. In Jill's bedroom, Hilda discovers that Jill is troubled by her past relationship with Embryo. On the ship Aurora, Jill speaks to Tusk, pointing out that even though he is the Knight of Vilcus, his recent actions have led to the failure of the Libertas mission. In another part of the ship, inside Celia's bedroom, Embryo approaches Celia with a proposal to include Ange in the Diamond Rose Knights. Celia, however, turns down his offer. Despite Celia's efforts to stop her, Ange is determined and manages to get past her to confront Embryo in the library. There, Embryo casually serves her tea and then surprises her with a marriage proposal. He shares his vision with Ange, explaining that he wants to marry her as part of his grand plan to destroy the world. Embryo opens up about his past attempts to transform the world. He tried to create a peaceful society by using mana to change the nature of ancient, brutal, and greedy humans. However, he confesses to Ange that his plans didn't succeed because the people in his world fundamentally remain the same, unaffected by his efforts to change them. After Ange questions Embryo about how he plans to change the world, he explains that the song he uses is based on a unified theory. He shares that he has transformed a cosmic law into a melody. Embryo's plan involves using the Ragna Mail to amplify this song, aiming to merge both worlds. By doing this, he hopes to create a new world using the energy of aura. However, Ange disagrees with his plan and attacks him. In response, Embryo starts to torture her, escalating the situation. Meanwhile, back on the Aurora in Hilda's bedroom, Hilda and Rosalie come to realize how important Ange and Chris are to them. This realization strengthens their bond, and they decide to rescue them. They no longer trust Jill and are wary of her intentions. To prevent Jill from escaping and finding Embryo, Hilda teams up with Tusk. Together, they work on a plan to preventing Jill's escape attempt. In the prison, Momoka sees Sylvia torturing Riza. Riza tells Momoka that Ange is in a shelter that only royalty can access. On the Aurora, Jill admits that Embryo controlled her mind and she became infatuated with him. She regrets letting her friends die and believes that killing Embryo is the only way to make amends. Realizing the truth, Hilda takes charge after Jasmine relieves Jill of her duties. Meanwhile, Embryo fails in his attempts to torture Ange. He gathers the other male riders to carry out his plan, but Celia is missing. Inside the shelter, Celia urges Ange to leave. In response, Ange chokes Celia but then gives her the Ring of Vilcus. Ange and Momoka manage to escape, but Ursha tries to stop them. Suddenly, the Vilcus appears, responding to the situation. Later, Sala arrives from the singular point to assist Ange. When Tusk announces his plan to head directly into the heart of the Mitsurugi Empire, Hilda reacts with a shout of surprise. Standing on the deck of the Aurora, she commands her para-male squadron. The recruits express their nervousness about flying over the human world, saying it feels very stressful. As the Aurora surfaces and opens a hatch, Hilda's team launches their assault. Above the Mitsurugi Empire, Ange encounters Sala. After their meeting, they part ways, with Sala heading off to rescue Aura. Rosalie, sounding confused, remarks that the war has already started. At that moment, something clicks for Vivian. She senses Ange's location using her innate abilities and adjusts her para-male, tilting one wing higher than the other before setting off to join Ange. Later on, Hilda and Ange find each other again, but then Chris focuses her attention on capturing Ange. However, Hilda steps in to protect Ange and disrupts Chris's plans. In the midst of the chaos, Chris unleashes beams in their direction. Hilda engages in a one-on-one battle with Chris. With a sarcastic tone, Chris remarks about how she was treated as insignificant, leaving Hilda shocked. At the riverbank where the Vilcus crashed, Momoka performs mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on Ange in an attempt to revive her. Miraculously, Ange regains consciousness. They make their way towards the sea, where their colleagues on the Aurora await them. While Momoka is searching for a car in a back alley, Ange runs into an enemy who is being controlled by Embryo. At the same time, up in the sky, Rosalie is in the middle of a battle and feeling regretful. She wonders aloud why they have to fight each other. The story then shifts to a memory where Chris, Rosalie, and Hilda are exchanging gifts. Hilda gives Chris some hair accessories, but she comments that Chris needs to change her hairstyle to match the new accessory because it doesn't suit her current look. Chris reflects on how she tolerated being treated this way and their self-centered behaviors because she believed they were her friends. Following this, Chris mentions that Embryo offered his friendship to her, which marks a significant moment for her. Chris angrily throws away her hair accessories and declares that Hilda and Rosalie are not her friends. Mary, worried that their conversation might be overheard, expresses her desire to help them even if it means going against orders. Determined, she heads towards them. Meanwhile, in the car driven by Momoka, Embryo claims that as the creator, he possesses the ability to control those who use mana. As they witness the appearance of strange beings under Embryo's control, Ange and Momoka make their way towards the building. Above the Iknomi Hashira, Sala engages in a battle with Ursha. She informs Naga and Kanem that recapturing Aura is impossible and advises their troops to retreat and regroup. Tragically, moments later, Ursha is killed while seeing her children. Sala urges Riza to join her, as Sylvia threatens Riza to return to the dungeon. The dragon reveals that Embryo killed Julio and escapes. Meanwhile, Ange reaches the rooftop where Embryo is located and encounters Tusk. Tusk fights against Embryo to give Ange enough time to escape. When Hilda tries to leave, Chris attacks her, but then Marika comes to help and shields Hilda from the attack. Sadly, Marika loses her life in the process. After Embryo teleports to where Ange is, Tusk also arrives there to rescue the girls. However, Momoka, who is still being controlled, attacks Tusk once again. But it's Ange who manages to break Momoka free from Embryo's control. Momoka then fights against Embryo herself. She gets shot in the chest, but she doesn't give up. Momoka stabs Embryo with a sword and pushes him off a cliff using a car. There's a big explosion, and Momoka gets caught in it. Tusk helps Ange get to his machine and kisses her, promising to always be by her side. Then Tusk attacks Embryo, triggering a vest that destroys the area. Embryo starts to create a new world, but in doing so, he causes the collapse of the world of Mana and the True Earth. During this process, Ursha asks Embryo to bring back the dead children, but Embryo refuses, claiming that he doesn't need such children for his new world. Realizing she's been manipulated, Ursha decides to return to her old friends later in the episode. Meanwhile, Sala and Hilda work together to try and stop the merging of space and time, but they struggle to make any progress. Ange, grieving the loss of a loved one, is overwhelmed by despair. In her sorrow, she tries to end her life but is unable to go through with it after memories of her past flood back. Overcome with emotion, she cries, feeling helpless and alone as she watches the sunset. While she's lost in her thoughts, Tusk appears behind her unexpectedly. Shocked and unable to believe Tusk is really there, she slaps him, convinced he had died. Confused and needing to confirm his identity, they become intimate. Afterwards, they watch the sunlight together. As they talk about Momoka, Tusk suddenly realizes something important and quickly takes Ange back to his shelter. There, they find Momoka waiting for them with a spread of dishes she prepared. Together, they go to the shore and watch as the destruction of the world begins to unfold around them. Embryo is really angry with Celia because she let Ange escape, and he punishes her for it. He tells her that his new world will only be for smart women. In the maintenance room of the Aurora, Nana and Mary are really sad about Marika's death. Meanwhile, Riza reveals that Embryo wants to join the two worlds together by using Aura and Ragna Mail. When Hilda and Sala talk about making alliances to bring Ange back, Emma, who is being controlled by Embryo, shows up and confronts them. But then Sala interrupts her. Ursha goes into the library and begs Embryo, crying, to bring the preschool children back to life. But he refuses her request. Ursha realizes that Embryo has been tricking her and using her all along. She's really disappointed and upset, so she buries the children and turns against Embryo. In Hilda's room, Hilda and Rosalie feel really foolish and powerless. Rosalie decides to defeat Chris in honor of Marika. In Jill's room, Jasmine tells Jill that if she had treated Celia kindly, she wouldn't have betrayed her. At the same time, Ange goes to a place where she used to spend time with Tusk. It's exactly how she left it the last time she was there. She remembers the past and starts crying. In Celia's room, Celia decides that she wants to kill Ange so that Embryo will accept her. In the medical room of the Aurora, Riza explains that Norma, who have the ability to reveal the truth about this world, are kept in quarantine. During a meeting of government leaders, they ask Embryo to save them from the chaos in the world. But Embryo rejects their request because he believes they are not needed in his new world. In Tusk's room, Ange is grieving over his death. She finds Tusk's diary and learns about his true feelings for her. It reminds her of what Tusk meant to her. Ange feels like she can't live without Tusk by her side, so she tries to end her life by shooting herself with a gun. But then she remembers the happy memories with Tusk and decides not to go through with it. She starts crying uncontrollably as she thinks about the happy times with Tusk while watching the sunset. Tusk himself appears. Ange can't believe her eyes and tearfully hits him. Then, to make sure it's really him, they have a physical relationship together. After that, both of them share their feelings and vow to create a better world. Suddenly, Tusk remembers he left something behind. When they go back to his room, Ange gets a wonderful surprise. Lamoka, who she thought was gone, is actually alive and has prepared a homemade meal for her. Filled with happiness, Ange then calls for the Vilkas, and they get ready to face the upcoming battle and address the crisis at hand. During the chaos caused by the merging of different times and spaces, Ange makes her way back to the Aurora. There, she joins the rest of the Aurora crew who are gathering to plan their final counterattack known as Libertas. As they each head to the battlefield, they carry their own thoughts and emotions. Hilda, having figured out that the Akino Miyashira is the central point of this space-time merge, commands the Aurora to head in that direction. During this time, Ange gets in touch with them. She, along with Tusk and Momoka, reunites with their friends and allies. Ange is initially taken aback when she sees Ursha's Ragna mail, but her surprise quickly turns to joy as she is glad to have her back. She even finds it in her heart to forgive Riza for her past actions. Ange discusses with Jill the most effective method to eliminate Embryo. Jill explains that the Vilkas and the song are key to unlocking the hidden world where Embryo's body resides. During their conversation, Jill reveals that she has handed over her command to Hilda. However, Ange informs her about Celia joining forces with Embryo. Following this revelation, Hilda decides to pass the leadership to Ange, acknowledging her royal status as a princess. Hilda expresses her admiration for Ange, telling her that she sees her as her prince and openly declares her love. Later, Ange and Tusk make a promise to each other to do everything in their power to return safely. Lacking other materials to give, Ange gives Tusk her underwear as a token of good luck. Ange emphasizes the importance of fulfilling their mission, and together, they launch the operation named Last Libertas. The Aurora powers through the surrounding enemy forces with its strong firepower. It then dramatically rises from the sea and takes flight, while the para-male squadron begins shooting from the air. As Ange tries to move forward, she faces a challenge from a para-male controlled by Embryo, which blocks her way. Embryo attempts to use a powerful weapon called the Dimension Cannon, but Ange manages to stop him. Meanwhile, Hilda and Rosalie engage in a battle with Chris, as Sala and Ange attempt to reach the prison holding Aura. However, their path is blocked by Celia, who expresses her desire for a world without Ange. In a crucial move, the Aurora manages to destroy the Akinomi Hasira, which in turn opens up a pathway leading directly to Aura. Tusk takes on the role of a distraction by engaging Embryo in combat, giving Ange a chance to advance towards Aura. However, Ange's progress is halted as she has to confront Celia. During the intense battles, the Aurora suffers internal damage due to enemy attacks, putting May in danger. Fortunately, Jill steps in to save May and continues to push forward with the mission called Libertas. In the midst of the chaos, Ange unexpectedly runs into her younger sister Sylvia after her confrontation with Celia. Sylvia offers to help, but Ange, realizing that Sylvia hasn't tried walking since her injuries healed, encourages her to start walking on her own and not rely on a wheelchair. Just as the conflict between Celia and Ange is about to escalate again, Jill arrives and decides to take on Celia herself. Ange and Sala make their way to Aura, while Hilda and Rosalie go up against Chris. At the same time, Tusk takes on Embryo. As the two worlds start to merge, the battle reaches its intense final stages. Throughout the ongoing conflict, Jill tries to explain to Celia the wrongdoings of Embryo, but Celia refuses to accept what Jill says. Meanwhile, on the Aurora, the males continue to defend and fight as Sala makes her way to liberate Aura. The struggle continues with Chris still battling against Rosalie and Hilda. Chris blames them for leading Marika to her demise. In the midst of this, Jill is working hard to persuade Celia to cease her aggressive stance. As Tusk and Embryo continue their clash, Embryo tries to unsettle Tusk by claiming that he will control Ange and that Tusk will never witness her untamed side. However, it is Tusk who strikes back, revealing that he and Ange have been intimate, and he knows intimate details about her, like the number of moles on her inner thigh. He emphasizes that Ange has fully accepted him. Meanwhile, Sala manages to reach Aura's chamber, but she encounters a new wave of attacking drones that prevent her from freeing Aura with her rifle. The situation worsens as the Aurora's protective shield is taken down, causing the ship to crash. The males find themselves in a perilous situation until Ursha takes charge and joins the battle. Inside Aura's chamber, as Sala sings, her song catches the attention of others. Embryo becomes concerned about the song, while Celia expresses her despair at never being chosen. In a fit of emotion, Celia strikes Jill, but not before new portals open up. As the males prepare for a final confrontation, with the convergence reaching 90%, Ursha selflessly leads the drones away and prepares to sacrifice herself to atone for her past. However, just as all seems lost, the dragons suddenly appear to save her and unite with Ange's crew. Together, they lift the ship and rejoin the fight, forming a formidable force against their enemies. Embryo sacrifices his pawns to try and stop the dragons. Unfortunately, Tanya and Irma end up getting killed, which reveals Embryo's true nature. He was using them as bait all along. Jill comes to Celia's rescue when another dragon attacks. She then goes after Embryo, who is targeting Ange. Meanwhile, Chris, in a very angry voice, tells Rosalie that they left her to die. This makes Chris feel abandoned once again, and she starts losing her sanity. Thankfully, Hilda manages to restrain her and opens her cockpit. Rosalie charges in and saves Chris by tackling her out of her machine, and they almost fall to their deaths. In a surprising turn of events, Rosalie kisses Chris and begs her to come back to her. However, Hilda catches them both. Later, Embryo prepares to leave, and Jill appears, asking to go with him. When he refuses, she freezes his body with a cryogenics bullet, but his machine manages to free him, and Jill ends up severely injured. As the distortion continues, Ange wonders what's happening, and Embryo grabs her from her machine. As Embryo teleported Ange away, the world teetered on the edge of destruction. The only hope for saving Earth now rested with the Vilcus. With everything at stake, the ultimate battle began where it all started. Back on the Aurora, Celia helped Jill to the hangar bay and called for a stretcher. However, Jill, in her final moments, refused the stretcher and made peace with Celia. As the world seemed to converge into chaos once more, Aura stepped in to protect them. She explained that the Vilcus had the power to take them to Embryo's hiding spot because it responds to the desires of its user. Ange wakes up in a bed in a place she recognizes. But then, Embryo comes up with a plan to have a race with Ange because he knows she has a strong will. However, she refuses to participate. When she tries to attack Embryo, he hits her with the back of his hand. Meanwhile, on the Aurora, Hilda reluctantly asks Tusk to use the ring to wake up Vilcus. Tusk has a stronger connection with Ange, so they hope it will work. Unfortunately, nothing seems to happen, and they're left feeling helpless. On Arzeno, Embryo corners Ange as she desperately calls for Vilcus. But without the ring, there's no response. Embryo prepares to harm her when suddenly, she starts singing the endless song. Tusk hears her plea and begs Vilcus to come to Ange's aid. Miraculously, Vilcus awakens and connects with the other two Ragna males in Sala's machine. Tusk along with others teleport to a special place called the Space Between Space. Sala then starts singing her part of the song. After that, Tusk manages to free Ange and they are finally reunited. Tusk puts Ange down and gets ready to fight Embryo using Sala's sword. Ange also prepares for battle as the Vilcus transforms into Night Vilcus. Together with the others, they confront Embryo's machine and the copies he summoned. On the ground, Tusk hurts Embryo and realizes that it's the real one. Despite getting injured, he continues to fight. In the sky, Hilda and Celia notice that their machines are the same and they both gain control over them. They work together to destroy the copies. Ange fires and damages the machine, destroying it altogether, while at the same time Tusk kills Embryo. Arzeno returns to the real world and Aura thanks them for their help. The entire group returns to the island where Ange voices her intent to work peacefully with the dragons, while the other world's citizens decide to live by themselves. Thanks for watching till this long, my fellow men of culture. Don't forget to tell us about your favorite waifu from this anime and subscribe to the channel for more content.